Yeah, I'm going to try this from a PDF, and hopefully this works well. Thanks for being here. Thanks for having me in Portland. It's really great to be here with all of you. This is split testing for product discovery. I've never taken a business or an economics class, so I'm sorry if I'm the worst person to do this, but just as a 101 on economics and a thought experiment, if I was selling dollar bills for 99 cents each, how many would you buy? All of them is the correct answer, right? So at least as many as you could possibly raise the money for. So to take a step back and to talk about brick and mortar businesses for a second, let's talk about like Stumptown coffee roasters down the street, right? They presumably make $1 or more for every 99 cents that they spend on goods and materials. But how far can that possibly scale? Like at some point you're going to hit this ceiling where your profits are just as high as they can get. Even if you have lines stretching down the street, you can't service customers as fast as possible. So this kind of reminds me of Lemonade Stand. I don't know how many of you have maybe played this game. I think it's an old computer game from even the 70s or the 80s. It's been repurposed a few times. I think the last one I saw was called like Lemonade Stand Tycoon or something. But the premise is very similar, where you open a lemonade stand and people are kind of walking up and down the street, and they stop and they see you and they enjoy your lemonade, and eventually they tell their friends and more people start coming, and they're rapping along the street, and everything's great. But eventually you have a problem with scale, right? Because your costs scale linearly with the demand for your product. So as people are coming down the street, they start tapping their feet a little as they're waiting in line, they grumble to their friends, a rainstorm comes, it wipes out your supply of lemons and water and that kind of thing. So how does that contrast to a web business? Like, for the exact same thing, if we could take 99 cents and make $1 every single time, is that any different than a brick and mortar business? And I think it is, but it all comes down to scale. So on the internet, the scale exists unless we're trying to service literally like the tiniest niche market in the world. The scale exists that we can, with pretty small margins, make pretty good profits, right? I think that there's, we've seen some stuff with daily deals sites, and this isn't always the case. But eventually, like, this is the holy grail for all web developers, right? We want to make a black box that is our web business, where we funnel in dollar bills and we print out $2 bills on the other side. So I think A/B testing is one great way to get you towards that goal, even if it's a difficult one to ultimately attain. And this is the holy grail, right? Putting a dollar bill into our machine, spitting out $2 is giving us a license to print money. So how do we do this? Like, as web developers, what do we do to try to get there? We talk about all this stuff. We talk about agile development, rapid iteration, continuous deployment. What do all these things have in common? Like, they're essential to building agile software. Everybody needs them on their team. But the one thing that they have in common is speed, right? And this all makes sense. We know as agile software developers and practitioners that we don't want to code in a laboratory. We want to basically be able to ship features as quickly as possible and see our users using them, and we need it. But is speed the whole thing, right? Like, if we're just shipping code as fast as it can fly out of our fingertips, then there's a chance we could be going nowhere fast. So we need to be collecting data and analyzing it and getting the right metrics for our business in order to make sure that we're actually moving towards the discernible goal and the ultimate, like, that we're servicing our business's bottom line. So I think A/B testing is often seen as this kind of fluffy thing for marketing people or business guys to kind of tweak around in spreadsheets and that kind of thing. But I think you can open up your mind and just think of this as a way to make use of your elite hacking skills or whatever, right? Because it's kind of an optimization problem. This is obviously a totally fake graph. But on one side we have money in or whatever, money coming out. We see that, like, ultimately the goal is just to get this thing to kind of fan out. And just as the way that you kind of tweak the performance of an algorithm over time, little tiny tweaks over time, like, oh, here's a percent improvement, here's 2%. As it goes on longer and longer, over the course of months or years, it can really have drastic effects in aggregate. So who am I? I'm Bryan Woods. This is me with a cockatoo I met in the Florida Everglades. I work at howaboutwe.com. We're in Brooklyn, New York. We are in the Dumbo neighborhood. This isn't actually outside of our office window, but it's pretty close. That's what it looks like. Sorry about this PDF, but this is kind of what our landing page looks like right now. So we're a dating site, primarily. I started in 2010. And we have a singles product, which is just a dating site, and then a new one that we launched about 6 months ago for couples, which is similar kind of things, where the premise is just to get people to go on awesome dates. So real quick about my business, there's a few things. This isn't an advertisement, but I'm going to give you some examples, so it's good to know. The one thing is that if you're going to launch a startup, everybody says don't launch a dating website. The market is crazy saturated. Our competitors have really, really deep pockets. And it's hard. Like, it's just everybody is already doing online dating and that kind of thing. So we needed to do a few things. We needed to really make sure that we could outcompete our competitors and do it with less money. So the data that we're getting and the kind of testing that we're doing is trying to get us towards that goal. We're also a subscription paid service. So people give us their credit card to use our software, and that ends up being kind of important to kind of get that scale working. So let's just start with some very basic A/B testing. This is the stuff that people think about when they hear A/B testing generally, I think. So this is an almost real example again. I'm launched my kitten sharing website or whatever. I have Twitter Bootstrap. I'm doing everything I know to launch my MVP. My header kind of says, hello world. But I think maybe it's a little bit stuffy, so I try like, sup everybody. You know, we're gonna really kind of lighten things up here. Our customers are, you know, not easily fooled, so it loses. But maybe we can, I don't know, test it with some red color. Maybe if we move the button into this like red, cool gradient thing, maybe that works better. Who knows? You know, this is a common thing. Like, oh, I'll just slap some disgusting satisfaction guaranteed every time sticker. So this is just trivial stuff. It's cosmetic. It's tiny little tweaks onto your pages. And if you're skeptical, you might be surprised. So going back to that optimization problem that I was talking about earlier, these things aren't going to like make or break your business, right? I think a lot of times you see people kind of bragging on the internet, like, oh, I threw a puppy on my subscription page, and now I have a 300% conversion improvement. In my experience, this is not how it works. But we do see improvements of 1% or 2% or 3%. And there's no reason that you can't just keep testing that stuff over and over again, right? There's no like high ceiling. Like this is as many people, I mean, I guess 100%, right? But eventually, like you can just keep improving, and over time and in aggregate, these things really, really do add up. So again, fake graph, the last one, I promise. But generally, the idea here is that with this kind of basic cosmetic kind of A/B test, this is the kind of trends that I've at least seen, where it's just small and tiny, and you know, month over month, it doesn't really look like it's adding up too much. But if you look at it over time, you see like, oh, wow, we went from a 10% to a 15% conversion rate. So if you want to do this kind of stuff, it's great. There's some great tools out there. Here are two that I've used, Visual Website Optimizer and Optimizely. They don't need any server-side code to be written. You can just drop a JavaScript snippet on the page, and marketers and product people can kind of tweak things to their heart's content. If you're using Rails, which I assume we all are, Vanity and ABingo are also great tests for this, and they let you go a little bit deeper. So if I was testing a button on a sign-up page, and one says, buy now, and one says take a tour or whatever, both of these allow us to say, like, okay, here's my goal. I'm testing signing up a user. So in my user create action or something, I would say I have a goal, and I've logged which button the person saw, and then in an admin dashboard somewhere, they're tallying up the results and showing you significance. So when to implement this kind of stuff? I'm not talking about anything too crazy, but just basic, let's test some colors, let's try some different fonts and that kind of thing. The first thing, the one caveat is that this is not going to be a substitute for finding product market fit. This probably goes without saying, but if you've built something that nobody wants and is willing to fork over some money for, it's putting lipstick on a pig, and it'll feel that way. That being said, this kind of stuff is really low risk, it's low cost, and the rewards are possibly high. So if you really can just, at the end of work one day, come up with some button ideas and just throw them into an Optimizely thing and just go home and the test runs, there's really no reason that you can't do that from the very beginning of your product. Like from the moment you put up that MVP, there's no reason you can't just have a couple different headers that you're trying. But what I really want to get into in this talk is kind of going deeper. Deeper not just in terms of deeper into our Rails application, which is the case, but also trying to figure out like deep into our organization of what do we want to actually build, what do our customers want, and how do we use split testing to figure that out. So let's go down the rabbit hole. So to start, what should we test? First, we need to figure out what features do our customers want. I know this varies from business to business, but often places I've worked, there's kind of a product person who has ideas or is reading news and kind of watching trends and has ideas of our product should have this roadmap because, anything ranging from this is like a hip new thing to users have been clamoring for it or whatever. But how do we figure out like what the value of these features that we're building is and when we should be building them? And what is the simplest version of the feature we can build to gauge interest? Like what is literally the tiniest little thing that we can do that might just be the glimmer of that ultimate goal of a feature that we can just kind of throw in there as a quick little test and see if there's even any interest or if it spikes and changes anything on your site. What are our customers willing to pay for? Which features are free and which require an upgrade? And furthermore, can you trivially move your paywall around? I think there's no reason not to question very fundamental assumptions about your business model, right? For instance, I said in our application, we charge you to message other people. That's always been the case, but we've tried other stuff. Like, it's free to message people, or certain other things are paid, or it's paid under certain circumstances or whatever. I think most code bases, if you haven't thought about this kind of thing, it's not just trivial to change the business model that way. But it's important, and I think that, if you're even like an iPhone app, right? Like, you're free one day, you want to charge $5 the next day. There's no reason not to test this stuff. So how much will they pay? Are our pricing schemes and payment structure flexible enough to be varied? And are we undercharging? So when and how often should we remarket to our users? And are we oversaturating our users, or are we missing possible sales opportunities? I think one thing here is that, I don't know if you guys have noticed this trend where you sign up for an application or something, some fancy new thing you read about on Hacker News or whatever, and you're at lunch and you're playing with it, and you kind of forget about it and you go home. And then maybe 2 days later you get this email from the founder, and he's like, hey, what's up? I saw you playing around with the application. Do you like it? Is there anything I can do? I think somebody probably published an article once that just said this worked great for us and everybody's kind of just doing it. I think that's a great example, because if it works, then that's great. It's getting retention, it's getting your users back, but it also could be totally bothering them. Another thing is, I know a lot of e-commerce stores have this system where, if I wanted to buy all of Cormac McCarthy's back catalog of novels, right? I put them all in my shopping cart on Amazon or something. I see the total price at the very end, and I get a little bit freaked out, and I just go away. And then maybe 3 days, I get an email that just randomly, and surprisingly, there's a 30% off Cormac McCarthy novels sale. These kinds of things, again, are great. You don't want to be spamming people all the time, but as long as you're gathering this data, it's good to see like which of these kinds of things are actually getting customers back and making sales, and which ones aren't. And ultimately, just any product curiosity. Every user-facing feature, anytime you think, well, I wonder if our users would like this. If you have a cheap way of building these A/B tests into your product, there's no reason that you shouldn't at least be gathering data about the effectiveness of them and seeing how they affect your customers and your business. So here's some examples that we've run recently. The first thing is, how can we get users to receive more messages, not necessarily send? We found that, this is probably kind of obvious, but since we charge to send messages, a good way to get people to want to do that is to make sure that they receive a lot of messages. So this is one of the things that we really try to do on our site. So here's an example of a feature we have called Speed Date. It's pretty straightforward. We just, we have a photo here and some new dates and some information about them. If you click yes, it'll send this little message saying, hey, I'm intrigued. That's it. And if you click skip, nothing. So the first embodiment, or the first vision of this feature was as a way to get users who had kind of fallen off back. We wanted to say, okay, well, they haven't logged in 60 days or 30 or something. Who knows what's going on with them, but maybe if we can just surface them again, maybe they've gotten kind of stale and we can kind of bring them back. That was the idea, and it didn't really work. I think generally people are gone for whatever reason, and they're not going to come back. Their profiles look kind of stale, and it wasn't really that great. So the first obvious A/B test we did here was, well, what happens if we show newer users? And I thought that would be kind of a no-brainer if this wasn't working. When we dug into the data, though, we found out that actually something interesting had happened, which was that in our larger markets, where we have lots and lots of people, New York, Los Angeles, San Francisco, that kind of thing, that algorithm worked better because we're showing fresher people, they look more active, and it's more obvious that they want to be on the site and communicate with you. But in the middle of Kansas or something, it was horrible. We run out of dates to show them, so there's fewer results. So then we took that data and we said, okay, great, can we do another algorithm that improves for both? Can we say, show newer people in New York, show older people in Kansas, and kind of balance it out? And ultimately we did. So another thing we want to do is, how can we encourage users to post more dates? Same kind of thing. You're active on the site, people are going to like you, you're going to have a better experience. So a big part of this is our site requires some kind of creativity, just because it's not about filling out your profile about yourself. You need to kind of think of something clever to do. Like, I want to do, I want to walk the High Line in New York. I want to try Grimaldi's Pizza or something. And that's not a simple thing to ask for somebody. So we just A/B tested this little surprise me button versus not having it. So we said, you click this surprise me thing, and we just auto-populate it with some ideas that we think would be great for your neighborhood. The idea here was that we were going to watch date posting metrics and just see if they're increased, and then if people are getting more messages. Probably no surprises, this worked. This is another. Same kind of idea. Like, we want people posting dates. We realize it's hard. So you click on this little form. You're about to post a date. And a few seconds later, this thing that says stumped kind of fades in and gives you some ideas. That also won. So should we force them? So here's the thing. Like, we want people to post dates. We know that at certain points in their life cycle, it's really important to get them active and getting them engaged with other people. So this might feel weird, right? Like, should we force our users to post dates? And this is what we tested. So in our sign-up flow, we had these modals that you can they black out the page, but you can kind of skip all of them. We tested this as the last step, which just says, if you're on our dating website, we want you to post a date. Like, that's what you're here for, right? And this is kind of a time when they're showing a lot of intent anyway. And we knew that this is just important. If we're going to get them in and get them involved, they should be posting a date. So there's no option out of this. Like, you can close your browser, or if you know JavaScript, you could probably hide it. But for all intents and purposes, this is a forced thing. So if you're getting this kind of spidey sense going off in the back of your head, like, this is horrible. This is obvious, bad user experience. We don't want to harm people. We want to coddle them. This is a famous user experience book that I've loved, Don't Make Me Think. But I like it because it says it's a common sense approach to web usability. And I think it makes sense. Like, this is obviously common sense that you want to limit the friction of your users while they're using your software. But there's another thing. So your spidey sense is going off because you know best practices. You know a best practice in user experience is to say, like, limit friction. But, like, what is a best practice? And if you have enough data, do best practices really matter? And my answer to that is that sufficient data obviates best practices. So what are best practices? Like, best practices are things that work for other people, right? And if you don't have enough data that makes sense, like, that's all that you can rely on. So if some user experience expert says, don't force your users to do something, you crazy person, it can make sense, but if you go ahead and try it, and you see that actually people don't leave the site, they're fine with it, and it does get them more involved, then your own data about your own business means much more than any best practice. So once we start doing this stuff, we're adding hooks into our application to try to move different levers kind of back and forth. We want to basically expand our conversion funnel. We want to do that by finding feedback loops and exploiting them. So here's kind of a flow of our site, right? Like, you sign up, you upload a photo, you post a date, you'll probably get some messages, which leads to more subscriptions. So you might be noticing a little pattern here, which is that this is just a funnel, right? And I think your whole business is a conversion funnel. I think people think of their conversion funnels in overly simplistic terms, right? So you have a landing page, and you convert by signing up, and then maybe you do a sale. So people are really hyper-optimized about trying to test those little places. But there's places all throughout your application that you can move, just do tiny little lever things, and you can find flows all over the place. So if you can broaden the base of that funnel, you're going to be able to improve revenue and conversion rates everywhere. So the results, I'm singing the praises of A/B testing. They're probably not that surprising. But we really have seen huge boosts to both conversion rates and revenue doing this kind of stuff. So I want to talk about our technical implementation a little bit. And beginning with this. So this is something that I think would be probably the most naive solution that you could think of. If I wanted to just split users in A and B buckets for a given experiment, like, what's the easiest thing I could do? Well, maybe if the integer value of this second is odd, I'll show it. If it's not, I won't. So this one might be obvious, but can anyone think of why this isn't a great idea? Sure, yeah, so that's the idea, right? That if I'm trying to hide your mailbox or something, you can click one time and it's going to be gone, and then if you come on a different second, it'll be there and that kind of thing. So I think the next somewhat naive solution, and we actually did this for a little while, is something like this. So should we show the feature? Okay, great. Let's just look at the user ID and see if it's odd or even, and then we'll show the feature or not. And I think this is, it worked for us for a little while, but also, can anyone think why this is not perfect? Exactly. So the idea here is that, even though we didn't have like one method that was always on or off, we actually started realizing that we were very, very often choosing even to be on and odd to be off. So people with even user IDs just started having crazy experiences because you're just testing weird whims that you have, and suddenly if you have user ID 4 or something, the site is crazy, and if you have an odd number, it's not. So we've gone a little bit further. This is kind of what we ended up having to do. We assumed that you have a users table, and we're just, the code doesn't really matter, but we're taking, the experiment name and then your user ID, and we're basically just grabbing a SHA of it and converting it from base 16 to base 10, taking 8 characters and then moduloing it against the number of buckets in the experiment. So, which is just a long way of saying that if we have a 2-bucket experiment, which is just an A and a B test, for this thing we could say, okay, well for this user, are they in bucket 0 or bucket 1? And we can filter it that way and kind of partition users better. Which means that we can also kind of wrap this at a higher level, and we can say, well, is this user in this experiment? What is their experiment bucket, and are they in the bucket that I'm asking for? So what we end up doing for reals in our code is something more like this. So is current user in this bucket 1 for the experiment that I'm running? So the good news, if you're interested in any of this, is that this is yours free. We've released it as experimental. It's on our GitHub. My slides will be up if you're interested in this. You can grab it. Has some included batteries. The first thing is that user partitioning I was just talking about. Those convenience methods, so we can just have a nicer, kind of friendlier way than that SQL scariness. We can start and end experiments from an admin dashboard. In particular, we ran one test that was more crazy than usual. I think maybe we tried tripling our prices one weekend. And I know I just said weekend. You probably know where this is going. But nobody was around. It sucked. We lost some money for 3 days. Nobody could really, we had to deploy new code to end the experiment. It wasn't great. So we added this ability that if nothing else, you can at least end it or start an experiment from an admin dashboard. And it hooks into most of Rails like admin frameworks that you know and love. So things that are not yet included that I would love to see added at some point. One thing is goals. So when I was talking about a bingo and vanity, you give it some kind of metric that you're trying to follow. Ours, I showed you, are kind of multi-dimensional. Like we want to see people post more dates and send more messages and that kind of thing. But it'd be good if nothing else, if you could just say, like, here's the one metric I really want to move with this test. I want to say, I want more users posting more dates. So I should be able to track that. I would like to have statistical significance built in, just so that you can kind of watch it in the admin dashboard. We have a data scientist, so we kind of let him be that number cruncher, but it'd be cool if it was just doing it on its own. And maybe some visualization just to see how things are trending. Really, pull it down, let us know if you have any thoughts, because I think that it could do a lot more. So to talk quickly, though, about technical debt, particularly technical debt in a brave new world of doubled complexity. So I think, it's not like I'm talking about a lot of debt that's going to be added to your code base kind of inherently by adding these things. But that being said, if your application has to work in both bucket 1 and bucket 2, there just is some inherent complexity there. I know in DHH's keynote yesterday, he was talking about hiding and showing delete buttons and that kind of thing. And those are just kind of often bug-prone areas, even with good testing. There's just another thing you have to kind of think about. And I think my obvious first answer is that automated testing is essential. I think we all probably know this. I hope we know it. I'm surprised still how often I hear automated testing get talked about as some kind of inertia that needs to be overcome. But automated testing will give you a good framework to just good baseline to know that if I'm throwing crazy code that I'm ripping in and out, I at least know what things are supposed to be doing. So all code also needs to be held to the same standard of rigor. You might want to under-engineer things a tiny bit, because again, if you're testing crazy whims that in 2 days you're just going to rip back out, you don't want to go crazy with how you first implement that feature. But that doesn't mean that it shouldn't be well tested, it should be well factored, you should be able to reason about it, and it should be isolated and self-contained. So test in isolation. This obviously means something very specific to object-oriented programmers and people doing TDD. What I mean in this case is really making sure that your A/B tests aren't bleeding into one another. So we try to limit things to one part of the application at a time. If we're doing an A/B test on the sign-up funnel, we don't want to have 5 going on at any time. And not even just for statistical reasons. It's also just the code gets crazy. You don't want to have that stuff nested. You're either in and out or out of the experiment. We want to keep it that way. And finally, of course, kill dead code immediately. I know that you can't really kill things that are already dead. But I think the important thing is we all know this anyway. Like, you don't leave dead code in your application, but especially this stuff is really risky to leave around. Especially if it's crazy, you want to try something just, rather radical. It gets really hard to reason about what your application is supposed to be doing if you just have A/B test forks littered all over the place. And particularly, you need to kill dead code thinking in terms of revertability. So I think, ideally, in a perfect world, if you implement an A/B test, you have it all in one commit or something, pulling it out and ending it should be as simple as reverting the commit. I think in the real world, you might have some QA stuff that you push on top of it, maybe a bug fix here or there or whatever. But as close as you can get to just having an obvious way, like here's where I started the experiment, now I'm pulling the code back out, it's going to save you from a whole world of hell of complex stuff happening. And finally, just don't get emotionally invested. Maybe it's silly to talk about emotions when we're talking about software. I mean, we're Ruby programmers, so I guess we all think you can be happy while you write code, but it's hard, right? Like, you spend 2 or 3 days working on a feature, you think it's going to be awesome, you're excited for your users to use it, and it costs your company money and you have to pull it out. Obviously, there's just no use really harping on it, and just end the test, move on, and try something else. So, measuring success. Statistical significance is obviously important. So what I mean by this is that, this could be a whole other talk. I'm not a statistician, but you need to be using a real tried and true statistical significance algorithm. We use something based on binomial distribution. We calculate confidence intervals. So if you've ever studied statistics, obviously, you know that if I flip a coin 100 times, it's not going to be heads 50 and tails 50 times. So it's important that you're at least using something kind of scientific to make sure that the trends that you're seeing are actually real. And I've actually, even if you're not using a framework with this stuff built in, which many have, the algorithms aren't that tricky. It's worth just reading them on Wikipedia or something, just making sure that you're doing something that is real. So another thing we rely on heavily is cohort metrics. We've been taking this along for a while just kind of for other reasons, to just see how our site's growing over time and that kind of stuff. But they've been so helpful when we've been doing these A/B tests. And the reason is because once you start getting kind of obsessed with tuning conversions and testing everything, it's easy to get into a situation where you're tuning a landing page or you're tuning an upgrade page, and you're really, really working on conversion rates, and you don't really realize unless you're checking old users how it's affecting them, right? So you can cause this like really hyper-optimized site that ends up being really aggressive and kind of spammy or something, and the users who have been with you forever, who love your product, end up losing and leaving. So if you're not like watching what's happening to the people that have been here all along while you're doing stuff to the new people, you're really going to lose out. We also have a site health dashboard. As a dating website, I think we have kind of unique things we have to take a look at. For instance, gender ratios, location, ages of our users. So this is the kind of stuff that, it might sound crazy, but we've had experiments where we've A/B tested and the experiment has won for males and lost for females. Sometimes it's anomalous. We try not to think too hard about why that might be. But we want to keep these ratios healthy, so it's good to at least know that if somehow we're running a test and these ratios get all screwed up, we can at least see the dates when we deployed these things and figure out why that happened. And finally, we just have a system of daily emails where every day it sends us all the A/B tests that are running, the number of times the users have seen it, and statistical significance, whether it's been obtained or whether it's kind of trending one way or another. So what do you do if there's a tie? Sorry. I think you can get kind of obsessed with this stuff too. You can see a lot of comments on forums where people are debating like, well, if it looks like a tie, it probably isn't. You're probably using the wrong algorithm. But a lot of stuff ends up being kind of a wash, and it doesn't really matter, right? So the first thing is that generally you should err on removing the new test code. I think that's just because you don't want to add new debt. It's just more code to maintain. So if it really is just a wash, just pull it out and forget about the feature. There's some, I think, times when that's not necessarily true. The first is if it really is kind of a tie, but the thing that you're building kind of is one incremental step towards the ultimate goal of your project. If you're doing a redesign, you're adding some new colors that are going to be handy in the future or something like that, it might be worth leaving in. One other example I can think of is if you can really build something that's self-contained enough that doesn't have a lot of maintenance needs. We have one page on our site that's a date map where some engineers built it on just some Friday afternoon time. And we've never had to do any kind of maintenance on it. And it's cool. It's just like this live updating thing where you see dates that are being posted. Developers loved working on it. It made them happier at their job. Doesn't really cost us anything to leave it up, so we did. So we've also seen some unexpected benefits from doing this testing at our company. The first, and I think the most important, is that we spend far less time arguing over new features. I think it's really hard. I know we talked about this before, but when you have product people and tech people know why it's crazy, why would we want to implement a Facebook Connect login? Facebook's APIs change every single day. It's horrible, but product people know that it's this viral cool thing. Why argue about it, right? And this is a good example. This comes from Forbes.com. I don't know why they were writing about this, but Mixcloud claims to have increased their conversion rate to sign up by 200 to 300% using Facebook Connect. Now, although most sites won't see the same level of improvement, I've chatted with several other developers that have quoted a 20 to 50% increase in signups. Anecdotal data, obviously, reads kind of like an advertisement, but this is the kind of thing that a well-meaning product manager can read and say, we're losing money. If we don't have this built, we could be increasing our conversions by 200 to 300%. So you get to work on the feature, and you're adding the little button, and then the next day you see, surprise, people hate being forced to use Facebook. We surveyed the internet, they say hell no. So this kind of stuff I found happen all the time until we started really testing this stuff. And I think the important thing is we've been able to move our conversations from is it worth building to just is it worth testing. I think building has a lot of baggage to software developers. We know that we're going to be maintaining this stuff. We really have to fight and make sure that scope doesn't creep out of everywhere. But if it's just worth testing, then at least those conversations become a little bit easier to have. And a lot of things are at least worth testing if you can do it this way. Finally, it gives us a defense against conflicting customer feedback. You love your customers, they're well-meaning. Often the people who love your site the most are the ones who scream the loudest about things. And it's often really, really hard to make decisions when your gut tells you that one thing is good for your business, but your customers are demanding something else, right? For us, the most obvious thing being a paid dating site is if you go to our user voice page, we have hundreds and hundreds of votes to make our site free. And I get it. I get why having something free is cooler than paying money for it. We've A/B tested this. So I don't know. I don't know if it's weird that we've A/B tested a fundamental thing, are we a paid site or not? But we have. So usually the premise that they argue with this is, there aren't many people in my neighborhood or in my whole city, so why should I pay to meet them? And I think that's totally a fair criticism. So we said, okay, great. So markets that don't have this X number of people in it, they're free. Let's see how much faster they grow. And absolutely, to my surprise, they haven't grown faster at all. Actually asking people for their credit card has had no impact on the growth of those markets. So if we had just listened to them, this would be the kind of stuff that would stress us out all the time, and I don't know what we would do about it. And finally, of course, more money doesn't hurt. So just to recap, rapid development is useless if you're not moving in the right direction. Speed is one thing, and it's important, but you need to make sure that you're taking data to make sure that you're moving quickly in the right direction. Tiny improvements over time can become huge in aggregate. This, to me, is the bread and butter of really good A/B test strategy, where don't get hung up or concerned that you're not seeing huge improvements right away. Just keep at it and just keep relentlessly testing it. Let data inform your decisions. There's a whole lot of conversations you just don't have to have if you have data. You can just say, sorry, no. That's not how it is. There are tools at your disposal. So I know I mentioned Optimizely, Visual Website Optimizer, ABingo, Vanity, our own experimental. So many open source tools for every single framework. There's no reason not to just get your hands dirty and just start testing this stuff. And finally, just be rigorous and relentless. Test everything you can, test whims, test fundamental assumptions about your business model, but do so with rigor. Test your code, make sure that you're moving in a sustainable way and that this kind of stuff isn't just going to bog you down. So thank you so much.